It was just any other night in Maplewood. But for me, Lily Thompson, it was another opportunity to escape the monotony that dominated my daily life. At just 25 years old, I worked as a waitress in the city's restaurant, a place where the tables were always crowded, but dreams seemed scarce. The routine was simple. Serve, smile, and at the end of the day, return to a small apartment that barely had space for my ambitions. It was on one of these nights, while serving a table in the corner of the room, that he entered. Charles Harrington, a 70-year-old man, with an intense look that seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime. He stood out not only for his appearance, but for the aura of power and wealth that surrounded him. I recognized him immediately, the city's tycoon known for his business and fortune. And, to my surprise, he looked directly at me. "Waitress, please, a glass of wine," he requested. His tone was firm, but there was a softness that made him attractive. I brought the order, and while serving, our eyes met. Time seemed to stop. "You have a charming smile," he commented, and I felt my heart quicken. "What is your name?" "Lily," I replied, trying to hide my shyness. "And you?" "Charles." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Lily," he said, with a smile that revealed well-kept white teeth. "Do you work here every night?" "Yes, every day," I replied, trying to appear unconcerned, although the idea of being in the presence of such a distinguished man made me uneasy. "It must be tiring," he said, leaning forward a little, as if interested in my every word. "Have you ever thought about doing something different?" That question made me reflect. I dreamed of leaving Maplewood, of seeking a life full of adventure and opportunity. But the reality was that I was stuck in a routine that seemed to have no end. "Sometimes I dream about it," I confessed, not knowing why I felt so comfortable talking to him. "But life here is safe." "Safe but stagnant," he added, and I laughed a little nervously. "What if I told you I could give you a new perspective? A dinner at my mansion, for example." I was stunned. An invitation from such an influential man. It was almost surreal. My instinct told me to refuse, but the idea of a night of luxury, away from the tables and the smell of frying in the restaurant, was tempting. "I would love to," I replied, trying to hide the excitement in my voice. "Perfect. I look forward to getting to know you better, Lily." That night, after work, as I was preparing for dinner, a mixture of euphoria and nervousness came over me. Charles's mansion was more than I could imagine. Imposing, surrounded by well-kept gardens and decor that exuded wealth. Upon entering, I was greeted by an atmosphere that seemed like something out of a movie. "You look stunning," he commented, as he led me into an elegantly decorated dining room. Dinner was a combination of sophisticated dishes and conversations that flowed like fine wine. Charles told me about his travels, his achievements, and I listened to him fascinated. "I'm looking for company, Lily," he said at one point, looking into my eyes with an intensity that made my heart race. "And I believe a union like ours could benefit both of us. I have a lot to offer, and you? Well, you're young and full of life." His words left me in shock. He was talking about a relationship that went beyond simple romance. I was overcome by a wave of ambition. The idea of being next to a powerful man, of having access to a life I always dreamed of, was tempting. "Are you saying you'd like to unite us?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "Yes, Lily. Together we can create something amazing." Those words echoed in my mind as the night went on. I was faced with a choice that could change my life forever. As I served the last dish, a part of me began to dream about what our future together could be. But another part wondered if he was making the right choice. The white flowers and golden bows created a fairy tale setting. The sun shone brightly in the blue sky, and a light wind was blowing, bringing with it the sweet scent of the roses that adorned the altar. I was nervous, my heart beating wildly inside my chest. The wedding was planned in a matter of weeks, but the anxiety she felt like it had been cultivated over a lifetime. There I was, dressed in a stunning wedding dress, with a veil that fell softly over my shoulders. The public's gaze was a combination of support and doubt. Some whispered among themselves, questioning why a young woman like me would join a man so much older. The murmur of the crowd mixed with the soft music playing in the background. Beside me, Charles, so elegant and distinguished in his dark suit, seemed to be in his element, radiating confidence and charm. "You look beautiful, my love," he whispered, smiling at me. His smile was comforting, and for a moment, all uncertainty melted away. The ceremony continued, and every word the priest spoke seemed to resonate in my mind, echoing promises of love and commitment. But amid all this happiness, a shadow of doubt persisted. "Do you really believe this is right?" A familiar voice cut into my thoughts. It was my friend Clara, who had always supported me, but now she had a worried look on her face. "Lily, he's a lot older. Aren't you just doing this for the money?" "Of course," I responded, perhaps more defensively than I intended. "I like him. He's kind and caring." But actually, Clara's question made me hesitate. I was so focused on my ambition and the promise of a luxurious life that I often forgot to ask myself what I really felt. As soon as we said our vows, I felt a mixture of relief and euphoria. Applauded by our guests, Charles pulled me closer and whispered, "Now we are one." He looked pleased, but there was something in his gaze that made me wonder if he also carried secrets. The reception was an ostentatious spectacle. The hall was decorated with glittering chandeliers and elegantly set tables. Musicians played classical songs, and the smell of delicious food filled the air. I should have been at the height of happiness, but there was an uneasiness inside me, as if something was about to happen. "Are you okay, darling?" Charles asked, noticing my distant expression. "Yeah, I'm just a little tired," I replied, forcing a smile. He seemed so worried, but I didn't want to worry him with my insecurities. The night wore on, but with each toast, each laugh, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something dark lurking beneath the surface of our new relationship. Conversation among guests often revolved around my role as Charles's wife. Some people seemed genuinely happy for us, while others looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "Don't forget that life is a trade-off, Lily," one of the guests, an older woman, commented as I poured drinks. "Never let love become a transaction." Those words stuck in my mind, and I wondered if I could truly love Charles or if my ambition was blinding me to reality. When we finally got to our room, the atmosphere changed. The luxury of the place was undeniable, but my mind was elsewhere. What did I really know about Charles? There was a weight in my heart that I couldn't ignore. Charles approached me, looking radiant, but I was still lost in thought. "Let's celebrate love," he exclaimed, raising a glass of champagne. "Today is our day." "Yes, of course," I murmured, but the truth is that, behind that smile, a shadow of doubt crept in. The wedding night was supposed to be a magical moment, but when I closed my eyes, I was enveloped by an unsettling nightmare. I dreamed of Charles's past, of faces I didn't recognize and stories I didn't understand. Darkness surrounded me, and I felt there was something deeper, a secret he kept under lock and key. What else hadn't he told me? When I woke up, daylight was streaming in through the window, but the feeling of restlessness remained. What had I done? Did I really know the man I had married? The life I had dreamed of was unfolding, but doubts began to eat away at my happiness. Married life began with an intense glow, like the twinkling lights that adorned our mansion. However, behind the opulence, there was an echo of loneliness that I hadn't expected. In the days following our wedding, Charles devoted himself to his charitable commitments and social events, while I remained at home, surrounded by lifeless beauty. I felt like a painting in a gallery, admired but isolated. "Lily, honey, can you help me pick out a tie for tomorrow's event?" Charles asked one day upon returning home. He was so involved in his routine that he didn't seem to notice the emptiness that had settled between us. "Of course, Charles. But don't you think you could, I don't know, spend more time with me?" The word loneliness was on the tip of my tongue, but I didn't know if I should say it. He looked at me with a confused expression. "Sorry, my love, you know these events are important. I do this for us, for our future." He smiled, but there was a distance in his eyes that made me uneasy. As Charles prepared for yet another gala, I remembered Margaret, an old friend of Charles who had appeared at one of our dinners. I didn't know her well, but her words echoed in my mind. She had mentioned that Charles had a complicated background. Why didn't I look for her? Maybe she could give me a new perspective. The next morning, after a bad night's sleep, I decided to call Margaret. Margaret. This is Lily, Charles's wife. Could you meet me for a coffee? I have a few things I would like to discuss. Her voice on the other end was soft, but there was a hint of curiosity. Of course, Lily. It will be a pleasure. How about the coffee shop on the corner? I'll be there in an hour. As I prepared, a growing anxiety consumed me. What did I really want to know? Margaret's words were stuck in my mind, but I didn't want to appear like a jealous or insecure wife. I needed answers, and that led me to Charles's office. The house was empty when I entered the office, and the smell of leather and polished wood enveloped me. The space was elegant, but there was something that made me feel like I was invading a sanctuary. As I looked around, my eyes were drawn to the desk. On impulse, I decided to investigate. It was then that I found a pile of documents. My heart raced as I flipped through papers that seemed to indicate investments and bank accounts in different names. What does that mean? I muttered to myself, feeling the adrenaline rising. Among financial documents, I found an envelope that looked older. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. They were records that mentioned his previous wives, and the circumstances of their deaths. Charles. The name escaped my lips. Margaret's words came back to me like an echo. He had a history, and I was getting involved in something much deeper and darker than I imagined. The idea that I could be just another page in his story made me tense. That afternoon I met Margaret at the cafe. She was sitting at a table in the corner, watching the street with a distant gaze. When he saw me, he smiled, but there was a weight in his smile. Lily, it's good to see you. What is happening? Margaret, I need to know more about Charles. About your previous wives. And about you. The tone of my voice was firmer than I expected. She hesitated before answering. Charles is a complicated man, Lily. He had problematic relationships. Things didn't end well. Some people talk about their death as if it were an accident, but... well, there are rumors. Rumors. What kind of rumors? I felt a wave of despair. They say he might have something to do with it. I don't want to scare you, but you need to be cautious. Her words hung in the air like a dark cloud. As we talked, a feeling of claustrophobia came over me. What did I really know about the man I married? Questions were piling up in my mind, but I didn't know if I was ready for the answers. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light on the elegant mansion that was now called home. I felt suffocated between the walls adorned with paintings and furniture that seemed to tell stories that I had not yet discovered. In recent days, loneliness had become my constant companion as Charles lost himself in social engagements and charity events. The life of luxury was a dream, but I couldn't ignore the restlessness that was growing inside me. It was one of those nights when, as I slipped into Charles's office, I found a diary in a locked drawer. The aged leather and the smell of old paper attracted me, and I couldn't resist. When I opened it, the words danced before me, revealing a life full of secrets. Charles wrote about lost loves, betrayals that marked him, and a loss that seemed to have left deep scars in his soul. I've never been able to forget what happened to Sophie, I read aloud, each word seeming to echo inside me. She was the only one who truly understood me, and the only one I couldn't save. The weight of these revelations made me hesitate. What did I really know about the man I married? It was no longer just a question of inheritance. It was a question of trust. The image of Charles, who until then seemed like a protector, began to fade, revealing a man carrying deep pain. That night, during dinner, the atmosphere was charged. I could feel Charles notice the change in me. He watched me with a look that mixed curiosity and concern. The elegantly set table couldn't mask the tension between us. "You are thoughtful, dear. What happened?" Charles asked, breaking the silence. "I found your diary," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady but feeling it tremble slightly. He stopped, the spoon suspended in the air. "You should not have done this." "Why not?" What are you hiding, Charles? Courage welled up in me, and I continued. I read about Sophie. It seems like you still love her. That's in the past, Lily. The past should not be dug up, he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But you can't just ignore what happened. This is part of who you are. I snapped, anger creeping up my spine. And who am I now? What does this change between us? He seemed calm, but the tension in his voice betrayed his discomfort. I don't know, Charles. All I see now is a man who hasn't allowed himself to move on. I'm here, but you're still stuck with it. My words came out harsher than I intended, but the truth was there, clear as the light from the lamp on the table. He took a deep breath, and for a moment the expression on his face softened. You do not understand. The pain of the past always accompanies us. It's not easy to leave everything behind, even when you try. So what am I to you? Just a way to move forward. Vulnerability was escaping me, and I didn't know how to deal with it. You are more than that, Lily. You are a new chance, a new life. But it's hard for me to forget, and I don't want you to feel trapped in shadows that aren't yours. He stood up, looking out the window. I don't want you to carry this burden. His words resonated with me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something darker he was hiding. Butterflies began to form in my stomach, and what should have been a moment of connection turned into an abyss between us. In the days that followed, my mind spun like a whirlwind. Charles tried to get closer, but I felt more and more distant. Visits to social events, fine dinners and superficial conversations couldn't fill the emptiness that grew inside me. A feeling of distrust began to blossom, fueled by the diary's revelations and the words that couldn't find a way out. That was when, on a sunny morning, I decided to visit the old city park, a place that had always brought peace to me. Walking through the trees, I let the cool breeze caress my face. I needed clarity to understand if what I felt for Charles was real or just an illusion created by the desire for security. As I reflected, I remembered a conversation I had with Margaret, Charles's friend. She had mentioned that he had a complicated history, and that many things were not what they seemed. Her words reverberated in my mind. Careful, Lily. Not everything that glitters is gold. The feeling that I was sinking into a sea of secrets and lies hit me hard. Charles's past was intertwining with my present, and I needed to decide whether I would continue to navigate these turbulent waters or whether I was ready to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. I walked away from Charles after that argument, my heart pounding a mixture of anger and confusion. Every day he became more of an enigma, and I more and more of a stranger in my own house. The nights were long and lonely, as he lost himself in charity events, in social engagements that didn't include me. It was as if I were living in a castle, surrounded by high walls, with no access to the world he inhabited. Seeking some solace, I ran into Jake, my coworker, again. He always had a way of making me laugh, and with him at least I didn't feel the pressure of having to be someone I wasn't. One night, after a tiring day at the restaurant, Jake took me out for coffee. The aroma of roasted beans filled the air, and the soft lights in the room created a welcoming atmosphere. Lily, you look different. What's going on? He asked as he stirred the cup. It's Charles, I replied, sighing. He isn't who I thought he was. Jake leaned forward, looking curious. Do you want to talk about it? Actually, I don't know if I want to, I confessed, feeling a knot form in my stomach. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a game and I don't know the rules. You deserve someone who makes you happy, Lily. Someone who sees you as more than just a wife, Jake said, with sincerity in his eyes. His words resonated with me, but Charles's image still lingered like a shadow. That same week, at a charity gala, I saw Margaret again. She approached me, her expression serious. Lily, we need to talk, he said, pulling me to a more private corner. You need to know that Charles is under investigation. Investigation? What are you talking about? Asked, my heart racing. Financial fraud. He could be involved in something much bigger than you realize, Margaret revealed, her voice tinged with concern. You can be a victim in this game. Her words echoed in my mind as the party continued around us. I looked at Charles, who was on the other side of the room, giving charming smiles and greeting the guests. The idea that he could be manipulating me, involving me in a web of lies, left me cold. How could I have been so naive? That night, upon returning home, I found Charles talking on the phone. His voice low, but the words plan and inheritance cut through the air like sharp knives. I stood frozen in the doorway, listening to every word. He looked so calm, so safe. What was he up to? Distrust grew inside me like a weed, suffocating any remaining trust one might have had. Desperate, I decided to confront him. "Charles, what were you talking about on the phone?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady but feeling like I was on the verge of an emotional breakdown. He turned around slowly, his face neutral. "Ah, Lily, you know how these things are. Nothing to worry about, just some administrative matters." "Administrative issues. You're being investigated, and I'm a possible victim in this game."
Excelime. Frustration boiling over.
"You don't understand. What we do is much more complex than you realize," he replied, running a hand through his gray hair, clearly uncomfortable. "I just wanted to protect you." "Protect? Or hide the truth? You can't go on like this, Charles." I screamed, feeling tears threatening to slide down my face. The anger and pain were palpable, and I no longer knew if I loved him or if I just wanted to escape that situation. He sighed, the tension between us growing. "Lily, the truth is a weight that few can carry. Sometimes it's better to live in illusion than to face reality." And there, in front of his words, I realized that I was on a dangerous path. The man I had chosen as my partner now became a shadow, a dark figure that I could no longer understand. The lines between love and distrust were blurring, and I wondered if I could uncover the truth before it was too late. The night was full of tension when I decided it was time to act. My heart was beating fast inside my chest, and adrenaline coursed through my veins. I needed to know the truth about Charles, and to do that, I arranged to meet with a private investigator who could give me the answers I craved. The chosen location was a discreet cafe on the outskirts of the city, away from prying eyes. As soon as I entered, I saw a middle-aged man with gray hair and a serious expression. He waved me over, and as I approached, I could feel the gravity of the situation. "Lily, right? I'm glad you came," he said as he gestured for me to sit down. "Thank you for having me," I replied, trying to hide the nervousness in my voice. "Do you have information on Charles?" "Yes," he began, looking around before continuing. "His fortune is not what it seems. There are indications that much of his wealth comes from illicit activities. He is being investigated for financial fraud." I felt butterflies in my stomach. Frauds. But he's so kind, so generous. "Sometimes looks can be deceiving, Lily. Be careful," he warned with a serious look. "If you're thinking about getting more involved, you better know who you're dealing with." After the conversation, I left the cafe with a whirlwind of emotions. What should I do now? Confront Charles? Or get away from him once and for all? I decided I needed to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. That night, I ate dinner in silence, watching Charles as he talked about his day. He looked so peaceful. "You're not eating, honey," he commented, worried. "Everything is fine." "Charles, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm but strained. He looked at me with a surprised expression but nodded. "Sure, what would you like to talk about?" "About you. I know about the investigations, about the fraud. What's going on?" He took a deep breath, and for a moment, the smile that always lit up his face disappeared. "Lily, you shouldn't get involved in this. The past is complicated, and I don't want you to get hurt." "I need to know the truth," I exclaimed, feeling the frustration turn to tears in my eyes. "I care about you, Charles." He stared at me, his gaze intense and enigmatic. "Do you worry about the inheritance?" Those words cut like a knife. "How can you think like that?" "I care about you, not just your money," I said, voice shaking. Charles got up and started pacing around the room, while I watched him, trying to understand what was happening. Lily, I knew from the beginning. I knew about your intentions. This was all a test. A test. Are you kidding? Did you use me? That's not how I saw it, he replied, stopping in front of me. I wanted to see how far you would go for love. What you truly value. Shock took over me. I didn't know what to feel anymore. And now, what will happen to us? At that moment, the police invaded the house. Charles Cooper, you are under arrest for financial fraud, one of the officers announced as I watched, mouth agape. The scene unfolded before me like a movie, and I couldn't believe what was happening. As the police took him away, a part of me shattered. I had fallen in love with him despite all his flaws, and now all of that was slipping away. That night, as I wandered around the house, I found a document I hadn't noticed before. It was a will, and when I read it, my heart stopped. Charles had left his entire fortune to a foundation that helped underprivileged young people. A gesture of love I would never have expected. Tears were streaming down my face. He hadn't deceived me. He really cared, but in a way I couldn't understand. I looked out the window, observing the darkness of the night, and realized that life was more complex than I imagined. I needed to reflect on what I truly valued. The inheritance or the love that, in some way, still existed between us.